Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Ashley Van Wees, and I work for the Global Legal Empowerment Network, which has recently launched Justice for All, a global campaign to scale up funding and protection for grassroots justice defenders. It's Wednesday, June 6th, and today we are joined by Maya Reddy and Junie Moon, who will be helping to field questions as well as advocacy experts to discuss justice in the OGP. Before we get too far into today's proceedings, I have a few quick housekeeping notes. Firstly, take note that this event is being recorded, and we will share the full recording and highlights later on our website. I also want to make sure you can hear well and are able to use our webinar system. Please look for a questions pane where you can type in your questions and communicate with us. There is also a button for raising your hand to get our attention. Today we have registrants calling in from 39 different countries. I'd also like to introduce you to the Global Legal Empowerment Network. The network is a growing community of more than 1,500 organizations and 5,500 individuals from around the world who are working to advance justice. We do this in many ways. One of the many ways is through our online discussion forum, where we discuss problems and share ideas, solutions, and opportunities. We also learn from one another through webinars like this one, and in face-to-face learning exchanges, leadership courses, and other events, all of which we announce on our discussion forum. Additionally, there is an online library which today has more than 1,500 free legal empowerment resources. Last but not least is advocacy, which is what brings us all here today. Don't forget to join the network on our website at namati.org. Membership is free, and we will be getting in touch with all of you after the webinar with the link to invite you to join. There will be time after the presentation to pose some questions to the presenters directly, so I encourage you to type into the questions pane. Time permitting, we can also give the floor to participants, so let us know via the questions pane if you'd like to be unmuted and the question or topic you'd like to talk about. And now I am pleased to introduce Coco Lammers, who will be moderating this webinar. Coco, over to you.
Thank you, Ashley. Hi, everyone. My name is Coco Lammers, and I am the Campaigns and Advocacy Officer for the Global Legal Empowerment Network. And it is my pleasure to be here with you today to moderate this important conversation on justice and the Open Government Partnership, or OGP, as part of the Justice for All campaign webinar series. I will introduce my distinguished group of panelists in a minute, and we'll invite each of them to turn on their screens when I introduce them so that we can put a face to a name and have everyone introduce yourself to the group. But before that, I just want to contextualize our conversation today. It may come as no surprise to many of us here today that access to justice and legal empowerment are really important tools to advance transparency, accountability, and citizen participation. These also happen to be essential goals of the Open Government Partnership. OGP, National Action Plans, are increasingly being used by national governments to advance justice gaps. As of 2017, more than 10% of all National Action Plan commitments were related to justice. And although this is promising, there's clearly still a lot more that can be done. During today's session, the goal is to come away with some practical advice on how to formulate a justice commitment through an open government process that will advance your work and help to increase funding and protection for justice defenders. We will also learn a little bit more about the upcoming Open Government Partnership Summit taking place in July in Tbilisi, Georgia. Registration for the summit is still open if you're interested in joining. Today's panelists have also been asked to provide concrete ideas for how the Justice for All campaign can better support collaboration to advance justice for all at the country level. This year, 76 new OGP National Action Plans will be co-created by government and civil society, the biggest cohort of new National Action Plans since OGP was founded in 2011. This is a wonderful opportunity for reformers to make headway and to fulfill promises made in the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically in Sustainable Development Goal 16. I'm joined today by a distinguished group of panelists who, thankfully, spend a lot of their time thinking about justice in the OGP. If you could each turn on your camera when I introduce you so that we can see you for a minute, that would be great. Hi, everyone. I'm Coco. Today we are joined by Joe Powell, who is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer at the Open Government Partnership. Hi, Joe. Sandra Elena, who is the Coordinator of Open Justice Program, the Ministry of Justice and Human Rights of the Government of Argentina. She's joining by phone. Hi, Sandra. Peter Chapman, who's the Senior Policy Advisor at the Open Society Justice Initiative. Hi, Pete. And Marlon Manuel, who's an advisor for the Global Legal Empowerment Network. Hi, Marlon. Joe, let's begin with you. The Open Government Partnership was established in 2011, a multilateral initiative that aims to secure concrete commitments from governments to promote transparency, empower citizens, fight corruption, and harness new technologies to strengthen governance. This year, in 2018, as I mentioned earlier, there are 76 new OGP National Action Plans that will be co-created by government and civil society, the biggest cohort since OGP's founding. Could you please speak a little bit about your experience with OGP over the past number of years and how civil society and specifically grassroots justice organizations can get involved in this process? Additionally, it would be great if you could share a little bit about what we can expect and how to get involved in the upcoming OGP Summit taking place in Tbilisi in July in Georgia. Thanks.
Many thanks, Coco. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Great, so thank you very much to the organizers for the invitation. Great to see so many people online and all the questions that came in on the forum in advance, so really helpful. So let me just, I guess by way of introduction, as Coco said, I work at the OGP Support Unit, which is the global staff which support governments and civil society to use OGP both at the country level through our members and also at the global level through the convenings and the kind of global partnership dimensions that we work on. So I wanted to just introduce really to the group some ideas and thoughts of what we can do together at the country level on access to justice and what we can do together at the global level. And hopefully that covers some of the questions that people had in the forum. So as Coco said, OGP this year has a record number of its countries engaging in creating new open government action plans. So this is really at the heart of what OGP does. It's our main action forcing mechanism. And our only requirement of being a member of OGP is that you must, as a government, sit with civil society and work together to prioritize a set of reforms that you will commit to through OGP. So since OGP started in 2011, there have been over 3,000 of these individual commitments that have been made, and they cover a huge number of topics on anti-corruption, access to information, extractive industry transparency, open data, service delivery, and an increasing number that are relevant to justice issues. And the main message I want to leave you with today is that access to justice is becoming much more of a priority for OGP, and I think there are some really big opportunities for this network. So this map that you see that's just been put up on the slide for those of you who are joining on the by video shows you all of the countries in OGP that are doing new OGP action plans this year. So these are 2-year action plans. They're co-created, as I mentioned, with government and civil society. And these are really great advocacy opportunities for you to push the government to include a commitment on access to justice. So those of you that have been involved in this for some years will know that in South Africa, in Colombia, in Burkina Faso, in a good number of countries now, we have seen concrete commitments to advance access to justice in the OGP plan. So what does that mean for you practically? How can you use this opportunity? So right now, in all of the green countries on the map, the government is supposed to have initiated a conversation with civil society about what should be in the 2018-2020 plan. Those plans are officially due on August 31st, although we know in reality they come in September, October time in many places. So most countries right now are looking for ideas about what they should include in their action plan. They will get those ideas from civil society. They will also get them from line ministries and government agencies, from private sector, from academia, and so on. So really they're right now in a moment of collecting ideas from their open government community in their country. So it's really important that if we want to see access to justice commitments increase in number in OGP, that civil society joins that process, that turns up at the consultation meetings or participates in the online forums and actually advocates for an access to justice commitment in your context. And I know some of the later presenters will give some more specific, granular examples of how that's happened in other countries to date. So my advice really to the group is, if you need to identify who your government point of contact is, we can provide that as OGP, that's public information. And also you should try and work out who the civil society leaders are in your country. So often civil society has organized itself into a collective. Sometimes they have elected a civil society leader to lead engagement with the government. It really varies a lot from country to country how this is organized. But the first step is to identify who is the government agency leading, who are the civil society currently involved, and then what are the opportunities for submitting ideas in this cycle. The good thing is we know from practical examples that this is possible. So there are some really exciting reforms that countries have already committed to on access to justice. So we know it's possible, but we also know it's only happened in a small number of countries to date, and we would like to see an increase. If you go to the next slide, the other thing that is exciting about OGP in 2018 is we have a number of subnational governments engaged who also are working on action plans. So in 2016, OGP launched a pilot program of inviting local governments to join. You can see on the slide the list of the 20 local governments that were, this is missing, this may be missing a few, but it should be 20 overall, who are pilots, pioneers in OGP, and who are doing the same as their national government, but at the local level. So there may also be opportunities to work on access to justice commitments at the local level in these authorities. So that's really about the country level process, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions about specific countries and how your country is doing, which we can answer in the Q&A. But the other thing I wanted to just introduce in this kind of introductory presentation was what we can do at the global level. What we found in OGP is that it's really important to have a coalition of governments and civil society who lead on a specific topic in order for it to take off globally. And just to make that concrete, if I take an example from another field on open contracting, in an anti-corruption field, open contracting now has over 30 countries in OGP who are advancing open contracting reforms through their action plan. That means they're publishing contracts, they're using open data standards to open up the information, and they're holding government accountable for contracts which are poorly delivered or inflated costs, and so If I look at why open contracting has succeeded in using OGP, I think there are a few factors. Firstly, they had a coalition of governments leading on this topic, what they call the C5, the contracting five of Colombia, France, Ukraine, UK, and they actually have led politically and encouraged other governments to include commitments on open contracting. They also had very strong civil society counterparts, Transparency International, the One Campaign, Open Contracting Partnership, and many other organizations who have been advocating for their governments to adopt open contracting standards. And thirdly, they had really good multilateral partners like the World Bank and others who are helping on the implementation side. So really what I think the opportunity in 2018 is to create a coalition around access to justice of governments, of civil society, of technical implementation partners, foundations and others who can come together and really push this into the global agenda. And that's really, I think, a very exciting opportunity. So one upcoming place that this can happen is the OGP Summit in Tbilisi next month, July 17th to 19th. Just to give you some highlights of what will be happening, we will have a high-level panel on access to justice in Tbilisi, including ministers from Georgia, we hope from Argentina, from one or two other countries, OECD Deputy Secretary General, civil society represented by Namati. So we will have the beginnings of this coalition be on the plenary main stage in Tbilisi. The other thing we'll do in Tbilisi is have a more technical workshop for some of the implementing agencies from governments or civil society working on access to justice to really go into the details of what it will take to try and get more of these national commitments in OGP. So we will have both a political moment and a workshop kind of technical moment in the summit agenda. And I think those two together present a really exciting opportunity to start building this coalition, as I mentioned. And then the most important thing we can do is after the global summit to make sure that that resonates back at the country level. So the idea is really to link the global moments with the country action plans to see if in 2018 we can increase the number of access to justice commitments. And that will really require this network to play an absolutely central role. So that's all I wanted to say by way of introduction. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions afterwards, but let me hand it back over to Coco at this point.
Thank you so much, Joe. That was really insightful, and it's great to hear that access to justice is becoming more of a priority for OGP. And you know, I really appreciate you sharing some practical steps on ways that civil society can engage with, you know, civil society leaders who are leading in country on this upcoming National Action Plan cycle, and how folks can submit ideas on how to ensure that access to justice commitments are included. You know, and I think it was great also to hear about how important it is to link up some of these national commitments to the global level to ensure that there's really take up on access to justice in 2018, whether it's through a global coalition of actors or kind of through this exciting upcoming opportunity at the OGP Summit this July. Thank you so much. Sandra, I will turn it over to you now. The government of Argentina has been an active member of the Open Government Partnership and has made efforts to increase access to justice both nationally and globally. Sandra has recently drafted a paper on justice-related commitments in OGP, which we will share with participants after the webinar. But Sandra, could you please share a little bit about how your experience working as the OGP point of contact for the government of Argentina, what you see as some of the best ways to ensure grassroots justice is taken up by national governments through this process, and how you've worked collaboratively with civil society throughout these processes. Sandra, it seems like you may be muted. If you could please unmute yourself, that would be great.
Can you hear me now?
And thank you.
Okay. So I was saying that I will first make a presentation of the findings of my recent paper, which is an update of a 2015 paper, and then I will share with you my experience as implementer of justice-related commitments at the government of Argentina. So first, I would like to share with you some conclusions and some findings of this update version of a 2015 paper that is focused on justice-related commitments at OGP action plans. OGP is currently gaining momentum as a strategic mechanism to implement judicial reform in associated countries. During the last 3 years, justice-related commitments became more significant at OGP and in all regions in the world. Between 2011 and 2017, a total of 100 OGP commitments aimed at justice sector have been delivered by the countries in all of the regions. Regarding this trend, there is a preeminence of the Americas and Africa countries that are committed to improve justice through OGP. And these countries included several commitments in their action plans. Just to summarize some of the key findings, we can say now that access to justice is the most important trend and topic. Yes, here you can see, and in the slide, these are the 3 most important topics which commitments are focused now. The first is access to justice. Then we have reform through open data. And there is the third one, there is an emerging trend which relates to violence against women, how to prevent and how to combat violence against women. But let me tell how I did this research. I looked up into the into the data set that includes all the commitments that are now enacted in all action plans that have been filed with OGP since 2011. And from all these commitments, we looked for the keywords judicial, justice, judiciary, law, courts in English and in Spanish. So we came up with a number of commitments. In 2015, we had only 35 justice-related commitments, but now in 2017, we have 100 commitments that are justice-related. So this is a huge increase in the number of commitments as a percentage. So 100 out of a total of 3,113 current OGP commitments, including in national action plans, are justice related. This represents 3.2 of the total commitments. And if we compare with what happened in 2015, we had that only 1.8% of the commitments were on justice. So this is an increase in 185%, which is more than the total number of commitments, the increase of the total number of commitments. So we can see that OGP is being used as a platform to increase the number of reforms, of the number of commitments that countries are willing to commit on justice. So what happens in different regions? Although Europe is the most active region in OGP, if we count the total commitments, if we take a look at the countries that have issued justice-related commitments, the situation looks different. The Americas is the most active bloc. 13 countries have committed on justice. A comparison between countries with any kind of commitments against countries with justice-related commitments indicates that 76% of OGP countries in the Americas and 72% of OGP countries in Africa have included the commitments on justice. So we can say that the Americas and Africa are the most important regions to advance justice-related commitments in the world. You can see some figures in the slide. I'm not going to explain all this because we don't have much time. So the significance of OGP as a platform for deliver reform in the judiciary seems to be greater in these two regions. Europe and Asia also have some countries that are committed to improve justice, but not as committed as the Americas. So, as I said at the beginning, related to the content, while in 2015 transparency was the main topic for the commitments, now we can see a trend towards access to justice. We did not analyze the content, and we did not go deep in the reforms and in the impact of these commitments. We are just saying what countries proposed in their action plans. So just because we don't have much time, I have to say that in the Americas, there are two champions in access to justice through OGP commitments, and these are Costa Rica and Argentina. And we have two different models. Costa Rica is the judiciary itself, the public office that commits in OGP action plan, and in Argentina is the Ministry of Justice. So these two models work. We can see that these two countries are moving forward the justice agenda. In Costa Rica, which I am now, I'm helping implement the commitment. The judiciary asked me to come and share my experience implementing in Argentina. So they are now building an action plan to comply with the public policy on open justice. And in Argentina, we had one commitment on justice in our 2015 action plan and one in the 2017 action plan. And in both of them, we are trying to advance access to justice and participation and transparency through a participatory platform that we call Justice 2020. And so far we have 40,000 people participating in 15 working groups that address more than 80 initiatives of reform. So we have a big movement, a big channel for participation, and this platform implies meetings that are in-person meetings that we conduct in Buenos Aires and in other regions of the country. And also we have a virtual platform which most of this participation takes place. What is important to take into account is the role of civil society in this aspect. This platform requires not only civil society organizations, but any citizen, private citizen, academic expert can be part of. And so it doesn't require like a formal organization participates, but anybody can be part of this Justice 2020 program. So we have a very active participation, and it depends on the different initiatives. We have more participants. For example, when we discuss reforms that are related to access to justice for victims of crimes. This is a very, very popular topic, and we have a lot of interest. And when we discuss initiatives related to anti-corruption, we also have many, many participants. Maybe we organize a meeting and we have 100 participants that are all providing comments that we include in our bills or projects in the case that we have to submit a bill to the Congress. So we take very seriously the participation, and we have very high standards for including the people that are making comments and their comments into the projects, and we cannot leave any comment without a response. So we are taking this participation very seriously. And on the other hand, to increase access to information, that is one of the pillars of access to justice, we also launched Open Data Portal 1.5 years ago, and we are including more and more data sets in this portal. And we built also this data portal, which is the first one in Argentina, and now there are a few in the region. But we built this data portal with the participation of key actors. So we set up meetings with key actors, with the ecosystem for data, and we try to prioritize which data sets and in which formats are we going to include in the portal. So we do all these initiatives through a participatory way, which I think, at least in my country, Argentina, is the first time that we see like a big participatory movement like this. And we are also working on access to justice to include not only the formal access to justice to courts, but also some informal ways that are maybe in some communities, local communities, more effective than going to the courts. So, and this is a program that is promoted by the Ministry of Justice, but we are also including the judiciary. We have the national judiciary and the subnational judiciary, so we are all working together towards making a more accessible justice system for all. So my last comment is that OGP is a platform for reform. We used it, so we committed at a national level. Also, Costa Rica, and these are two experiences that are working, and two best practices on how countries can use OGP as a platform for advancing open justice in their countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra. It was great to hear the findings of your paper, and we'll be able to, we'll make sure to share it in the forum and in the post-webinar email with participants today. It was great to see that actually there have been over 100 OGP commitments on access to justice since 2011, and hopefully we'll see a major upswing in 2018 this year. And thank you also for sharing your experience working on the National Action Plan process, both in Argentina and then also as well in Costa Rica. And it's so heartening to hear that your government is taking civil society participation seriously. So thank you so much for those remarks. I will now turn it over to Pete. Pete, you co-wrote a blog last year about how to include grassroots justice commitments into OGP processes. Your organization, the Open Society Justice Initiative, has been a longtime supporter of grassroots justice and legal empowerment, now the new Justice for All campaign. What do you see as some of the key ways and opportunities to ensure grassroots justice perspectives are included in the open government partnership process to advance access to justice and legal empowerment?
Great. Thanks for these questions, Coco, and thanks to the team of the Justice for All campaign for the webinar. As Coco mentioned, I work on legal empowerment with Open Society Justice Initiative. And I think it's a critical moment in the fight for access to justice. From South Africa to the UK, justice budgets under governments getting away with allocating public funds to advance access to justice. At the same time, society is being restricted, and it's actually harder to push for progress. So I think the OGP platform and the way that OGP can help advance access to justice is quite exciting, building on their years of productive engagement between government and society for innovation. slide. So Sandra just helpfully laid out sort of general trends on access to justice and justice data. Over the next 6 minutes, I want to talk about three substantive frontiers, I think, for access to justice, legal empowerment, and the open government partnership. The first.
Thank you, Pete. 1 second, sorry to interrupt. I think the connection is a little broken up. I wonder if we might want to just turn off the webcam for a little bit to see if that will help with the connection. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Is this clear, Coco?
A little bit. Let's see how it goes.
Okay, thanks. So I wanted to talk about three priorities for access to justice and legal empowerment within the OGP. The first being how the OGP can advance innovative justice policies. The second being how OGP can help diversify and strengthen financing for access to justice. And finally, a focus on measurement and accountability within the OGP process. And as I think has been mentioned, the OGP support unit and others on this call will be coming out with a publication that offers more in-depth exploration of these and other domains for the summit. But I want to give a preview here and hopefully stimulate some discussion and reflection. Next slide. Before I guess I discuss these three priorities, I do just want to make one quick overarching note about civic space. OGP is broadly premised on a vibrant and active civil society. And I think this is particularly true for legal empowerment and access to justice. The map on the next slide from Civicus shows a general trend towards increasing restriction on civil society activity. And OGP has really been focusing on this with two recent reports from the support unit as well as the International Center for Nonprofit Law. And I would just encourage participants to also look at those reports which can be shared because I think there are many relevant themes around registration of organization, processes for healthy financing for civil society that I think are worth considering as we think about access to justice within the OGP platform. And I think civic space groups might be natural allies for our work at a national and indeed global level. So next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about how OGP can help drive innovative justice policies. I think we've seen from a number of contexts that the OGP process and the National Action Plan platform can help break down some sectoral silos that exist at a country level and drive innovation. And I want to talk about three examples. First, around prioritizing access to civil justice across sectors. I think civil justice is essential for opening government in practical terms for everyday issues. And in South Africa, Joe alluded to the National Action Plan process around a commitment for the support of community advice offices, which are a community level institution that provides a resource for helping people understand their rights, organize, and navigate authority. And the National Action Plan process helped broaden that conversation from a relationship with the Department of Justice to ground it in other sectors, whether that's labor or local government. Secondly, I think national action plans present an opportunity for establishing a basis for non-lawyer contributions towards access to justice. From Argentina to Indonesia, we're seeing non-lawyers increasingly being brought into a wider justice network. And I think national action plans moving forward might provide opportunity to move access to justice conversations beyond the conversation with bar associations or judiciaries or state justice institutions to one instead of how non-lawyers and innovative structures like paralegals can help open government across sectors. And then finally, I think there are numerous examples of national action plans being used to open up justice systems through through more open data. So whether that's Colombia or Kenya, we've seen the productive publication of justice system data providing new opportunities for discussions of priorities and performance. Next slide, please. I want to also touch on how the OGP might be a tool to diversify access to justice financing. On the one hand, OGP might seem like a strange place to discuss funding, given that it's not a funding vehicle per se. But I think the justice sector and particularly courts are often viewed as independent to the broader sort of executive goals of open government, transparency, and participation. And so, like with policy, I think national action plans provide a platform to discuss how justice programs and efforts can collaborate with other government and civil society actors to diversify a funding environment. And there are examples of this through existing national action plan processes, whether that's around public financing and sectoral partnerships. I think in Burkina Faso, we've seen a commitment specifically around expanding public funding of legal assistance. And I think national action plans can offer an entry point for both the justice sector funding, but also the other funding that's relevant to OGP thematic priorities that Joe discussed, whether that's corruption or public services environment. And then secondly, I think the subnational space and OGP's increasing role there is quite dynamic and interesting. It's perhaps mirrored by a recognition in the access to justice space that there's a need to promote learning around how to leverage local government and municipal contributions for access to justice. And I think the U.S. commitment in their last action plan provides an example of how a government is thinking about using subnational partnerships and partnerships with civil society to advance opportunities to expand recognition and funding for open government work. In the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about OGP and accountability through monitoring and measurement. OGP plans include this process through an independent review mechanism where commitments are actually reviewed after they're made. So I think that's different than some other international oriented commitment processes where a commitment can be made and follow-up can be a challenge. And so as commitments are included in the action plan, there's actually a guarantee that progress towards that commitment will be examined. And I'm sure Joe could talk about that in more detail if it was of interest. But I want to highlight two examples of how the OGP plans are drawing links between measurement and monitoring and access to justice. At the last OGP summit in Paris, the Paris Declaration actually explicitly noted a link between access to justice data and progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think investing in understanding of progress towards access to justice through administrative data, through survey data, including legal needs surveys, can help drive a productive conversation around progress between government and civil society. And then finally, I want to just talk a little bit about marginalization. I think this has also been an area that OGP is focused on in terms of how vulnerable groups participate in national action plan processes. And I think in Jordan, for example, we've seen commitments around persons with disabilities and their use of the formal justice system. And I think that might be an example about how we target some of our access to justice work towards particular populations, because we know that justice problems are not evenly distributed, that different populations seek information in different ways and ultimately resolve disputes differently, and a population-specific approach might be advantageous through a national action plan. So next slide. In conclusion, I think we've heard from numerous, from Coco, Joe, and Sandra, that there really is a lot of momentum around access to justice in the Open Government Partnership. And I think 2018 does appear to be a key moment in that process. I guess I would just want to stress that from my perspective, a strength of OGP as a platform is its flexibility. So, what's needed in work, what might work in a Macedonian national action plan invariably will be different than Mongolia. But the plan gives national civil society groups the space and ultimately the voice to articulate priorities. And so I think that's an exciting opportunity. Just to conclude, Joe mentioned the sort of two official events taking place in Georgia in July. And I would just flag as well that several of us on this call are going to be convening a workshop on July 16th, the day before the summit actually officially starts, strategizing about how access to justice reformers in government and civil society actors can leverage the National Action Plan process. So if you're planning to attend in Georgia, I'd encourage you to just reach out via the NAMITI or the Legal Empowerment Network discourse page, or reach out directly to me via email so we can coordinate around our push on access to justice. So thanks, Coco.
Thank you so much, Pete. And I really appreciated you stressing the importance of, civic space and engaging with that community at the national level, and sharing your perspectives on, innovative justice policies and how to, strengthen diversified financing and really think about measurement and accountability through this lens of OGP and access to justice. And also, stressing at the end that OGP is an exciting and flexible platform, which can allow, hopefully, for a lot more access to justice commitments this coming year. So thank you so much. Marlon, your home country, the Philippines, has made demonstrable progress in incorporating justice goals in its recent national development plan, but did not succeed in integrating these as justice commitments in its OGP National Action Plan. Could you please explain how this happened and share some of your experiences working with the open government process to advance grassroots access to justice and promote legal empowerment at the national level?
Let me tell the story of what should have been a success story for the Philippines as far as the OGP National Action Plan is concerned. In 2015, when I attended the OGP Summit in Mexico, Sandra's presentation about the findings on the commitments and the very low percentage of justice commitments in the national action plans struck me, and I was attending the OGP Summit at that time as a representative of the Global Legal Empowerment Network. I was not active yet in the OGP process in the Philippines. But during the summit, I had the opportunity to meet with the Philippine team, both from the government and from the non-government sector, those who are part of the OGP steering committee. And I had a question for them. And my question was, how come, despite the many initiatives ongoing in the Philippines, the National Action Plan did not include a justice commitment? And the answer given to me was simple, that the steering committee prioritized transparency and accountability initiatives in the National Action Plan at that time, and specifically focusing on the budget, on the participatory budget preparation, budget monitoring, and also in the participatory auditing. But the steering committee members at that time, and specifically I remember the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Budget and Management was telling me, you should be active in the OGP process, and you should ensure that the next National Action Plan should include justice commitments. And it should. And I took that as a challenge. In 2016, I became a member of the OGP Steering Committee, representing the non-government organizations, representing the non-government sector. So it was an opportunity for me to bring that agenda forward. And we thought that we would be able to accomplish that, meaning to include justice commitments in the National Action Plan. And there were many positive factors that should have led to that desired outcome. Let me start with the Sustainable Development Goals. Even before the formal adoption by the UN of the SDGs, we already started the campaign for the justice goal. and the translation of the justice goal into the country plans. I remember in May 2015, my former organization, the Alternative Law Groups, together with Namati, my current organization, organized a conference in the Philippines to start discussions on the SDG and the preparation of the Philippine development plan. In the Philippines, our planning process coincides with the term of the country's president. So our Philippine development plan is a 6-year plan that overlaps, coincides with the term of the president. So the formulation happened recently, and the Philippine development plan was formulated for the period 2017 until 2022. And I would say that the SDG, and specifically Goal 16, heavily influenced the planning process for the Philippine Development Plan. For the first time, our Philippine Development Plan contained a whole justice chapter. There was no justice chapter in the past development plans, but for the first time this year, we have an entire chapter devoted to justice. In the past plans, justice initiatives would be mentioned in 1 or 2 paragraphs in the chapter on good governance or in some other chapter. But this time, in the 2017 to 2022 Philippine Development Plan, we had a whole chapter on justice. So when I was sitting in the steering committee of the OGP, I was saying our Philippine Development Plan should be integrated into the National Action Plan. And all the members agreed. Even the Secretary of the Department of Management said, we should not have separate plans. Our plans should be all integrated, whether it is the General Development Plan or it is the OGP National Action Plan. They should all fit very smoothly. And so that was the objective when we were preparing for the National Action Planning process for the OGP. But then there was a transition in government in 2016. So we had a change in government middle of 2016, July. So a new administration came in, a new secretary for the Department of Budget and Management, a new secretary for the Department of Justice. The Department of Budget and Management acts as the lead agency for OGP in the Philippines. And I would say that the new secretary of the Department of Budget and Management is very supportive of OGP. Not so for the Department of Justice. So when we had the initial list of potential commitments as we were planning for the National Action Planning process, I immediately noticed the absence of any justice-related commitment. And so during the steering committee meeting, I asked that question: How come our initial list, our long list of potential commitments in the National Action Plan does not contain any justice-related commitment? And the Department of Budget Management explained that they sent letters to all departments of the government, and including and especially the Department of Justice. And the reply they got was that the Department of Justice did not have any commitment to put forward as part of the National Action Plan. And so we started the National Action Planning process with that general framework, that the Department of Justice appeared to be not too keen in participating in the OGP process, but we were saying the Philippine Development Plan contains a whole chapter on justice. Why not include the major programs in the development plan in the National Action Plan? So the National Action Planning process continued. But unfortunately, because the Department of Justice did not or was not willing to put its stake on any justice-related commitment, that did not happen. And then subsequent events proved to be non-conducive to the inclusion of justice commitments in the National Action Plan. There was the relationship between the executive and the judiciary, specifically the Department of Justice and the judiciary, turned sour. The supposed cooperation that was planned in the Philippine Development Plan did not happen. So what we have is a Philippine development plan that is very good as far as the inclusion of justice programs is concerned, but we failed to include those very good justice programs into the National Action Plan. What are the implications? Well, we still have the development plan. We still have the Philippine Development Plan that will be good until 2022, which serves as the blueprint for government. Unfortunately, as far as the OGP process is concerned, those justice programs are not commitments presented as part of the National Action Plan. As a final thought, uh, do we still consider OGP as a very good platform? Yes, it should be. It should be. Unfortunately, in the Philippines, I would say it became a casualty of the transition in government. Despite advocacies from civil society, despite the very participatory nature of the National Action Plan, if the government lead agency for justice, in our case, the Department of Justice, would not be willing to put its stake and to say, we are committed to do this as part of our OGP commitment, then it would not happen, as it happened in the Philippines. I will end with the good news. The good news is that that Secretary of Justice has been, well, has resigned. Let's just say that. So there's a new Secretary of Justice, and so we hope that the Philippine government, even if the National Action Plan has already been finalized, we are still hoping that the justice programs in the Philippine Development Plan will be pursued, and if possible, will still be integrated in the future OGP processes and plans. So I will end with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marlon. I really appreciate you sharing what went well and maybe what didn't so much in terms of ensuring that access to justice commitments were taken up in the Philippines. So I really appreciate you sharing your story and perspectives and experience of actually working as a civil society member to influence this process. So thank you. I want to thank each of our presenters for sharing their perspectives on this really important topic on access to justice and the OGP. I have already learned a lot, and I'm excited about the prospect of engaging in the important OGP process from an access to justice perspective throughout the remainder of the year. I want to quickly acknowledge that we are running a little over time. So if you need to leave at the top of the hour, please feel free to do so. But if you can stay, and if any of our presenters can stay, that would be wonderful. I want to thank all of you who have posted questions during the registration process, and as well as in the GoToWebinar platform chat box already. We've gotten some great questions already on, a little bit more specifics on, Sandra's research, some of the lessons learned on engaging with OGP and the National Action Plans, and specifically on civil society and citizen engagement in OGP, and how OGP actually is seeing that moving forward. But I wanted to kick off the question and answers session with just linking back to this, the webinar series, which is through this Justice for All campaign. As you may know, Justice for All is focused on scaling up funding and protection for grassroots justice defenders around the world. How is and can the OGP process support these goals? I'm also curious to hear your thoughts on kind of a protection angle there. And how can this global community of Justice for All campaigners help you do your job better? Anyone want to kick it off?
Sure, Coco, this is Pete.
Great, thank you, Pete.
Great, and I think I would link it to another question I thought come through on the question page around how and whether the OGP is a vehicle to sort of institutionalize programs that maybe extend beyond a particular administration or official. And Marlon just talked about the importance of personalities in this work. And so I think we've seen that the OGP can be hindered, obviously, by transition and by personnel moving around and lead sort of commitment staff moving. But I think at the same time, we've also seen it as a way to take in commitments that might extend beyond an individual. So this is a little bit of a circuitous route of saying, if you can get justice commitments in the OGP, I mentioned the IRM. There's then going to be a review of whether the commitments being advanced, irrespective of whether the official who championed that commitment or the ministry that championed that commitment has the same personnel. And so I do see it as it's by no means a guarantee, but it's another strategy to, I guess, diversify the stakeholders and allies around a set of issues. And so I think from an access to justice standpoint, it's really a way to reach a less maybe traditional audience by engaging sectors and making the case for access to justice across different institutions.
Thank you, Pete. Those are really important perspectives, so thank you for answering that question. Sandra, is there a question that you would like to speak to? Please unmute if you can. Sandra, I think we can hear you now.
Yes, can you please repeat the question?
We have gotten a question for you around kind of some of the research methodology that was adopted, and kind of also about some of your experiences on aligning some of these OGP processes, working synergistically with the Ministry of Justice in Argentina.
Okay. Well, in 2015, I used the Explorer, the OGP Explorer, and using some filters, I just analyzed the justice-related commitments using different keywords that relates to justice, to law enforcement, and courts. And this is how I decided which commitments were going to be included in the research. Not all of them were afterwards included because I then conducted a second analysis to be sure that the commitments were focused actually on justice. So this is how I did it in 2015, and for the 2017 research, I used an Excel spreadsheet that OGP shared with me. So this is how I selected the commitments. And then after that, I analyzed it by principle, but key principle of OGP, the key values, the transparency, participation, accountability, and innovation. So we classified the commitments according to these values. And after, what we didn't do is to analyze what happened to the implementation of the commitments. We only took into account the IRM reports, but we didn't go beyond that. So this is a part of the research that is still missing, and maybe we could conduct research on that side in the future, in the near future. So this is how I calculated all these numbers. If you see the paper that hopefully it's going to be published soon, you see that there are many graphs and figures about how the different regions in terms of advancing justice-related commitments, and also you have the champions by region. So a complete analysis and explanation of the methodology is going to be in the paper, that I think the link to the paper is going to be available for all participants today. So related to the second questions about the engagement of civil society, in Argentina, civil society is very active and has been active for many, many years. Maybe in the justice sector is not that active as in other sectors, but we were very successful in terms of we divided the channels and the platforms for participation among different initiatives. So we are not asking for people to participate just in open government as this in general, but in different aspects that are very concrete related to justice. So for example, in criminal reform, so association for of victims try to make their voice heard in these new reforms, or in anti-corruption, or in several aspects related to access to justice for disadvantaged populations. So we have groups of women, group of indigenous population. So this is how we targeted different populations and organizations, and we invited them to participate in these very formal channels for participation. We are also very strict evaluating the participation to ensure that it's a meaningful participation, because we didn't want to create just a big platform for participation just to show up and to say, well, we are doing this, but we want to be sure that the groups and the voices are meaningful, and we take this into account. So we provide we conduct some meetings every 6 months to show the results and show how the voices were included in our initiatives. We are happy so far because we have good relationship with some civil society organizations, also with community-based organizations, and these very maybe small organizations of indigenous women in one province, or associations of victims of specific crime. So we are happy in this engagement, and we hopefully continue this over time.
Thank you so much, Sandra. It's great to see that the government of Argentina is taking this process so seriously. Marlon, over to you, to answer any of the questions that have been raised so far, or any kind of last remarks that you have before we conclude the session.
There's a question about whether some individual officials could prevent the inclusion of some very good commitments into the OGP. And in the Philippine experience, that happened. And that could happen in other countries, that some individual officials could hijack the national action planning process. But having said that, I would still say that, like what Pete said, our efforts should continue and should transcend specific administrations or governments in different countries. We should strive to have more institutionalized programs beyond that would be insulated from the politics and from the transitions in government. Secondly, however, I would also say that we should recognize that outside the OGP processes, there are justice programs and many good initiatives that are happening. The challenge now for us within the context of the OGP is to ensure that the OGP process will somehow capture those developments happening in the countries. I'll give the example of Mongolia. I just came from Mongolia, and I found out that there is a big justice program being implemented by the Ministry of Justice of Mongolia that focuses on legal education for grassroots communities, including the training of paralegals. It's still at its inception stage, but the challenge for the OGP process, and since Mongolia will be starting its national action planning process soon, is to ensure that what is happening outside the OGP planning process will be integrated and captured as part of the OGP National Action Plan, which will further reinforce and strengthen whatever is happening, as in the case of the Ministry of Justice plan in Mongolia. So maybe in future conversations within the OGP community, we should discuss more about that challenge of having separate planning processes, having justice programs that are not feeding into the national action plan and somehow being considered as isolated from the OGP. OGP is a very good platform, and especially for justice programs that focus on access to justice, that focus on legal empowerment of disadvantaged and marginalized groups. So the challenge for us is to ensure that the 3% now, based on what Elena mentioned earlier, from the 1% we now reach the 3%. That 3% should be pushed further, so that we will have more justice-related commitments, more legal empowerment, access to justice programs in the OGP National Action Plans. Thank you, Coco.
Thank you, Marlon. And thank you, everyone, for posing your questions. We hope you'll continue the conversation in our forum and continue asking questions along the way. Linking up the brave and bold work that the legal empowerment community is doing to advance justice for all in their own context with global processes such as the Open Government Partnership is vital towards creating a feedback loop between the grassroots and global levels. And clearly, civil society has an important role in fostering positive dialogues between government and civil society. This year, as was discussed during today's webinar, is an exciting year for OGP, and the hope is that with the 75+ new National Action Plan will lead to hundreds of new access to justice commitments, which will be a testimony of the strength of the open government movement across the world. Justice for All campaign is supporting civil society to use these new OGP National Action Plans to increase financing and protection for grassroots justice defenders. If your country is rewriting a national action plan this year, as a civil society representative, we invite you to take a seat at the table and ensure alignment between grassroots justice level and OGP commitments into the coming years. This brings us to the end of the formal part of our webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for the excellent questions and points raised. And thank you also to Ashley, Maya, and Junie for helping make this webinar a success. In closing, I would like to once again thank our group of presenters for a productive and insightful discussion today. We look forward to continuing the conversation in discourse and beyond. Thank you also to the people working behind the scenes to manage the platform, and for all of today's participants to the webinar. If you haven't had a chance to do so yet, be sure to join the Global Legal Empowerment Network for free to join the discussion on important topics like these and more at namati.org/network, and head to justiceforall2030.org to sign the pledge and show your support to scaling up funding and protection for grassroots justice defenders around the world. We will be in touch by email with a reminder invitation and also to share the link to the full recording of today's proceedings. Let's keep the conversation going. Thank you and have a great day.